Welcome to the N1 Fitness Podcast. I'm your host, Marcus Sadu, and today we're going to be chatting about my 30-pound fat loss transformation that I did from April 2020 to October of 2020. So over the course of 6 months. And the reason I'm just getting around to sharing this with you guys now is because I've been sharing my client success stories as of late, and I just hadn't got around to mine. So here we are. I'm going to be explaining what I did on the nutrition, movement, workout, sleep, stress management, and alcohol front. And I'm also going to touch on what I learned because I'm still learning about my body on a daily basis. And the learning definitely becomes magnified when taking on something like a fat loss phase, an intense one at that. So I'm going to share my key takeaways as well. Now, the first logical question that might come to mind is like, dude, you're a nutrition coach, you help folks get in shape. Why don't you just stay in shape? Why do you have a transformation to begin with? Shouldn't you practice what you preach and just stay lean year round? That's a fair question. And the reason I had accumulated more body fat when I kicked this thing off in April was because I had been actively in a muscle building phase. And being that I've been training for a long time now, in order to build muscle, or at least an appreciable amount of muscle, I need to gain some fat just because of my training experience. Beginners can build muscle and lose fat quite effectively at the same time, but once you get to a certain level or you're holding a certain amount of muscle mass, that becomes a lot harder to do, hence I got a little soft. So I'd been traveling in Mexico and Colombia, and then I decided to come home to Vancouver to be with my family just because of everything going on in the world at that time. And I thought that it would be a really cool time to get in the best shape of my life because we essentially were in a bit of a lockdown, and besides work, it was something to challenge me, keep me occupied, and I just thought, why not? I find this stuff really fun and interesting, and I always learn different things about my body as well as myself via the process, so I decided to do it. Now, I will say that my muscle building phase definitely got away from me a little bit, and I put on far too much body fat, and that's just not necessary to build muscle. Some fat gain for more experienced lifters is a given, like I touched on, but not that much, especially given how little muscle mass I had actually gained at the end of the day, but I'll touch more on that in the what I learned section in a little bit. So how did I do it? Nutrition. I focused on single ingredient whole foods that I cooked myself, and I was sure to account for all of my portions via protein, carbs, fat, and alcohol, because if you want to make really solid progress, most folks are going to need to track their intake in one way or another because it's just like your budget. If you go by feel, you are probably going to overspend. So I took the guesswork out and the ambiguity out of the equation and tracked everything. I still ate out. I still drank alcohol, I still had treats here and there, but overall, the vast majority of the food that I ate, I cooked myself via single ingredient whole foods. And just to give you guys a few examples, in case you don't know what I mean by that, salmon has one ingredient. Salmon, rice is rice, potatoes are potatoes, veggies, fruit, meat, fish, seafood, eggs, beans, lentils. I focused on foods that don't have a barcode and contain only one ingredient because they're far healthier, they are far more satiating, and therefore they made it easier for me to reach my goal because I rarely, if ever, felt true hunger. I did have cravings from time to time, but genuine hunger was quite rare, even when I was getting to my leanest, because these foods are so high volume, nutrient dense, and filling. Now, if I had included a bunch of processed foods in on a regular basis, I definitely would have been hungry frequently because those foods are high in calories, lower in food volume, and much less filling, not to mention not nearly as healthy. So I gradually reduced my calories as I got leaner, and this actually isn't due to a ton of metabolic adaptation, meaning your metabolism ramping down to a massive degree or anything like that. Fortunately, it's much more simple than that. When you lose weight, you are lighter. Lighter things burn less energy than heavier things. A dump truck is going to go through a lot more fuel than a smart car. And so as you lose weight, your calorie demands, assuming your activity levels stay the same, are going to decrease because you are smaller. So for example, if you've lost 20 pounds, you're now going for a walk with 20 fewer pounds to carry. You're working out with 20 fewer pounds. You are sitting on the couch 20 pounds lighter. Smaller animals burn less energy. So as my fat loss slowed or even halted, I would decrease my calories a bit And I'd be sure to keep my activity levels the same, because if I reduce my calorie intake, but then also reduce my calorie expenditure via less movement, those things could cancel one another out. So I was sure to keep my steps and workouts the same and simply reduce my food intake. It is foolproof. Speaking of walks and workouts, what did I do on the movement and training front? Step-wise, I averaged about 11,000 steps per day for the entire 6 months. And to be honest, I probably averaged 11 or 12,000 steps per day for the last 5+ years. Walking is so underrated for fat loss and general sense of well-being. And if you want to hear more about that, you can check out podcast episode 119, Walking versus Workouts, What's Better for Fat Loss, where I explain the whys behind this in more detail. Workout-wise, I was actually working out in my living room for the first 3 months of this transformation, and that played a role in the lack of muscle mass I ended up maintaining from my muscle building phase, just because you can't challenge your muscles in the same way with such little equipment and weight access. It was tough from a keeping it fresh standpoint. However, you work with what you got, right? Gyms weren't open. I had 2 15-pound dumbbells, 1 20-pound kettlebell, and a 50-pound kettlebell. So man, I was getting creative. And then when I was able to hit the gym again, I did so for 5 days per week for the remaining 3 months. As far as exercises go, I focused on what I always focus on: compound basic movements that give you the most bang for your buck. Pressing, pulling, squatting, deadlifting, pull-ups, overhead presses, etc. And it's worth mentioning that I didn't do any formal cardio the entire time. So not once did I step on an elliptical or a stationary bike, other than to maybe do a little warm-up on leg day or something like that. Hitting my 11K steps per day and either working out from home or the gym was my activity in a nutshell. I think I went for 4 or 5 bike rides over the course of that 6 months, but in the big scheme of things, that's trivial and barely worth a mention. Sleep. I prioritized sleep the entire time. Always have, always will. And that set me up for success on the nutrition and movement front, because I eat better when I'm well slept, and I'm much more likely to get my movement in when I'm well rested. Shocker, right? That's really it on the sleep front. I got anywhere from 7 to 9 hours per night based on my needs at the time. Stress management wise, I find that dialing in my nutrition, movement, and sleep pretty much handles this to a large degree. However, I do meditate 5 times per week for 10 minutes first thing in the morning, and I did and still do bi-weekly sessions, so 2 times per month with my therapist, and I've been working with him since I was about 18. So those are the main designated stress management strategies in my life, and they remain super constant. Something to note is, if you dial in your nutrition, movement, and sleep, you likely won't need a ton of stress management stuff. However, it's typically stressors themselves that throw a wrench in your nutrition, movement, and sleep habits. So it's a bit of a chicken and egg situation, but basically you just got to find out what works for you as far as staying grounded and aware. Walking, again, is amazing for stress management and so simple. I probably sound like I'm sponsored by Big Walking Corp or something like that, but it's so effective. It's free. It makes you feel better. You burn calories. You get light exposure. Your sleep improves. We are wired to walk 5+ miles per day, most likely. That is how our ancestors got around. We used our legs. Cars have not been around for all that long. Moving on to alcohol. So booze has played less and less of a role in my life as I've grown older. If you've been following me for a while now, you know that I struggled with alcohol and drug abuse in the past. And fortunately, I don't anymore and haven't for quite some time. However, I did have a bit of an aha moment in January of last year with alcohol again, and I'm going to dedicate an entire podcast episode to that. But in short, I have scaled back my alcohol intake even more in the last year and a half, and it's been massively beneficial in so many ways, which is probably not surprising to you. Now, during this transformation, I still had some drinks here and there. Definitely more in the first 3 months than in the second 3 months, but that wasn't anything overly intentional. It was just that I felt like drinking less and less, and I have different priorities now, and waking up and feeling good every single day at this point in my life is far more important to me than crushing 6 to 8 beers, and of course, less alcohol is only going to benefit anyone's fat loss goals. I'd say I averaged anywhere from 2 to 3 drinks per week over the course of the 6 months. So that is what I did, guys. I didn't take any supplements, no PEDs or performance-enhancing drugs other than caffeine in my coffee, nothing fancy. And now we're at the learning part. The absolute biggest takeaway for me personally was that I will likely never hold that much body fat again in my life. There was no need to put on that much weight in order to gain muscle. I completely overdid it, and I could have gained just as much muscle with half the amount of fat because I overshot my calorie surplus by a bunch. Lesson learned there. I also discovered just how much easier it is to get in shape when alcohol is really reduced. It's such a game changer just because there are calories in alcohol itself. But that's just the tip of the iceberg, because what's often overlooked is how that alcohol impacts your habits, i.e., poor food choices, not only while you're drinking, but the entire day after, sometimes even 2 days, not to mention less movement, because who wants to go for a big walk or exercise when they're hungover? Sleep is also interrupted, which then also impacts food decisions for the worse, as well as movement habits. So there's really a snowball effect around alcohol that is easy to gloss over from a lifestyle standpoint in general. And because I scaled back my alcohol intake the most I ever have in my adult life, this really hit home as far as waking up feeling great every day and just how much of an impact it was having in so many areas of my life. I also learned that I really don't like to spend too much time in the gym. 3 to 4 sessions is more than enough. I don't like going any more than that just because the gym becomes a bit of a chore at that point for me, and that's exactly what I don't want. So right now in my maintenance phase, I am going to the gym 3 to 4 days per week, and I might even reduce that to 2 to 3 days, but we'll see. Now you may be quite surprised to hear that I only work out 3 to 4 days per week, and guys, this is just how powerful nutrition is from a body composition standpoint. Killing yourself in the gym is not only not sustainable, it actually just doesn't work for body composition improvements. You cannot out-train or out-gym a poor diet. It is straight up ineffective. There are no ifs, ands, or buts about it unless you're a pro athlete training 5 hours a day, and even then there are overweight athletes. So there you go. Now, what else can you take away from this episode and implement yourself? If there was one key takeaway that I could highlight for you, it would be this. Getting and staying in shape becomes easier and easier the more you practice. However, it's never entirely effortless. I do this for a living and it still requires effort on a daily basis. I have great habits, and if I was to compare getting and staying in shape when I was 20 to where I am now at 34, it is far, far easier, but it still requires work. I think where a lot of folks go wrong is they get in shape and then they think, I'm done. You are not done. Like I said, this stuff gets easier. However, you can't just go back to what you were doing prior to getting in shape and expect to maintain your results. I remember asking my mentor or therapist, same guy, years ago, when are you done? Like, he's done so much inner work on himself. And so I asked, when are you finished? When can you just fully relax? Or how do you know when you've reached your personal growth destination? How long will you be doing this work for on yourself? And he said one word. Until. I learned at that point that this health and fitness thing is exactly the same. There is no retirement when it comes to taking care of yourself. You either do and you have amazing quality of life, or you don't and you have subpar quality of life. There are always improvements to be made because we change on a daily basis. Our circumstances shift, our priorities change, we learn, we grow, and this nutrition, movement, sleep, stress management game is also played until. There are no secrets, as you just heard. I do the exact same stuff to get in shape that I share with you guys and that I share with my clients, and I continue to do these things on a daily basis. It may appear to be effortless on the outside, but it always requires effort and consistency for absolutely everybody. Nobody is exempt. Action over time. If you're interested in applying for one-on-one nutritional coaching and or workout design with me, you can click the link in the description below or head on over to n1fitness.com/coaching. Follow me up on Instagram at n1fitness and feel free to friend me on Facebook at Marcus Sadu. And lastly, be sure to hit the subscribe button on whatever platform you're using. Thanks so much for tuning in, and I will catch you on the next episode. See ya.